Something that I don't really talk about on the channel, like a lot at least, is that there was one point in my life that I like really wanted to have kids, like really bad. I think there was actually a live stream a while ago where I said that I wanted to have like enough children to start my own softball team. And I really felt like that at the time, honestly, like I'm being so serious. But in the last couple of years, Aaron, my husband, and I have made the choice to be child-free by choice. And it's something that has made me really fearful. Like I've been very afraid of making that choice because people tell you, like, if you don't have kids, you're never going to feel fulfilled or you'll never know like true love until you have a baby, right? Like there's a lot of societal messaging, particularly towards folks with vaginas, that if you don't have a baby, you're going to feel sad and unfulfilled. And especially like at the end of your life, things will be very bad, right? So there's a lot of like FOMO happening there. And it seems like that very pervasive societal messaging leads to a lot of folks who shouldn't be having children or like don't want to have kids having kids, which then means that they end up on places like the Regretful Parents subreddit talking about how much they hate their lives. And to be fair, it's not a lot of people. I want to talk about this today because there is some interesting research that I want to share with you. There's not a huge percentage of people. The research that I found seems that it hovers between like 7 and 10% on average. There's research that's been done in different countries, right? But the thing that is also important to know is that like 7 to 10% of like hundreds of millions of people is a lot of fucking people. And also that's just the people who are willing to admit that they are regretful parents. So it's semi-pervasive, I think, and still important for us to talk about from a psychological perspective. If you don't know, my name is Mickey. I'm a therapist. We talk about therapy things here. And this is something that I wanted to address because I had a TikTok show up on my feed. TikTok really has my number as a child-free by choice person. And this woman, she gets anonymous stories from folks, and she read the story from somebody who is a regretful parent, and it's honestly very sad, but in a touching way. So I wanted to share some of it with you. Let's talk about that first, and then I have some other stuff I want to share.
When I was 15, my parents got divorced. It was messy and painful, and I knew then that I didn't want to get married or have children. I spent my teens with no place to live and dealing with drug addiction. Luckily, I was able to get sober, and when I met my husband at 19, it was the first time I had felt truly loved by anyone. I still struggled with my mental health, but I was getting a university degree, I was working, and I had lots of friends and support. Things were looking up for me. I got pregnant accidentally when I was 22. My husband.
Really quick, this is something that shows up in the research a lot. There are different types of regretful parents. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that. Some folks just straight up regret having children. Like they will admit to the fact that like, I wish my children had never been born, which is its own thing that I think we should talk about in a minute. But there are other folks who regret the circumstances around which they had children or things that have changed in their environment after they had kids. So, for example, one of those being like, I regret having had kids with the particular person that I did. Another one of those is regretting having kids like too early in life or just the timing around that. And something that's important for us to address about this is that a lack of access to medical care, i.e. abortion, is a big part of that, right? I think it's really important to address in our current political climate that denying people access to their own choices, autonomy related to healthcare results in things like this. And we're going to get into some of the impact of regretful parents and how that traumatizes and scars both the parents and the children. But one thing that is important to note here is that we're not just talking about like terrible, shitty people who had children and are fucking awful, right? Like a lot of times these folks will acknowledge these feelings or talk about these feelings because they didn't get the opportunity to make that choice for themselves. So it manifested in all of this sort of like domino effect of impact of consequences that ultimately add up to this life that they're very unfulfilled in or they feel very traumatized by. Really quick though, I want to say thank you to our sponsor this week, which is Delete Me. If you have been here for any length of time, you will know that I hate New Year's resolutions actually. But what I do love is a good clean out. I love a good like start fresh and cleanse your space. And I especially love doing that digitally, particularly because doing it with Delete Me only takes you 5 minutes. So in case you're not aware, Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that allows you to remove your personally identifiable information from the internet because data brokers can legally obtain and sell that information, which is very jarring to me. I'm not a fan of that. If you don't know what a data broker is, by the way, they are these corporations that they take your personal information, they package it all up into these little profiles, and then they sell it. And these profiles can include things like your name and your phone number, but also your address, like very personal and private things to me, at least. I'm a very private person. So Delete Me will take that information and manually remove it from the internet. There are real people, by the way, that are available for things like custom requests, and they can help you if you need help. But I love that Delete Me will continually monitor to make sure that your information stays removed. It just makes me feel very safe. It's not like we're removing it one time and then never looking at it again. It's nice to know that Delete Me has my back and helps me keep the information that I don't want on the internet off of the internet. I'm going to show you guys my Delete Me dashboard right now because, again, like I said, they continually monitor and remove your personal information from the internet. And we also just moved, so I've been very cagey and weird about our address and our other information. So I was really glad to see that they're still removing our information. It just makes me feel very safe in our new house with our fresh start and all of those things. So if you would like the same peace of mind, then you should check out Delete Me because they have a special code for all of my followers to get 20% off of your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/Mickey Atkins and use promo code Mickey Atkins. That's joindeleteme.com/Mickey Atkins with promo code Mickey Atkins. Thank you again to Delete Me for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in.
My boyfriend at the time had a very financially stable and secure job, and we had a really good, loving, long-term relationship. My brain was not developed enough to think, do I want this pregnancy? I only thought about the logistics. Would we be able to take care of a child in the position we were in? Yes. I didn't need an abortion. We weren't struggling. We were good people. Logically, we had the means and resources to have a child.
See, this is another thing that happens, right? People often feel the societal pressure, like we were talking about, to have children. And so sometimes for folks, the thought process is we're not financially struggling, or I'm not underwater, or I don't dislike my partner, right? This wasn't an accidental pregnancy from a one-night stand or something. And so if I want to have kids eventually, why not start now, right? And that's not necessarily true for all people. Sure, sometimes that works out for folks, and that's just like a, haha funny story that you tell over dinner sometimes. But sometimes it does actually mean that your life ends up in a way that you really did not intend it to, and that makes you resent your children and feel very unfulfilled in your life, like we were talking about.
It didn't even occur to me to think about if it was what I wanted for my life at the time.
That's very sad.
My siblings had children already. Being an aunt was cool. And like so many others, it felt like what I was supposed to do with my life.
Yeah.
My life had been such a disaster up until that point that it felt so natural and normal, we decided to keep the pregnancy.
This is important. Two things. First of all, one thing that is mentioned in the research about being a regretful parent, or like what causes this to happen, is that it's sort of like it's a difficult situation or scenario, I guess, deciding whether you want to have kids when you're not sure, right? Like this fence sitter sort of position, in that it's not something that you can try and return, right? Like there is no return to sender option when you have kids. And it's also not something that you can accurately suss out how it feels when the kids aren't yours. So being an aunt, or being like, a nibbling babysitting for somebody, even being somebody who like it just has a lot of familiarity with children or whatever, like that isn't the same as having your own kids, and especially isn't the same as experiencing pregnancy and childbirth and all of the complications therein. So people often find themselves in a very hard to navigate dilemma in like, especially these moments where somebody might have gotten pregnant on accident, or somebody might be faced with this like pressure of like, it's just what you do, right? This is what you do. You grow up and you move out and you get a job and you find a partner, and then you have a baby and you buy a house and you get a golden retriever, and like that's the thing, right? We're all supposed to do that. But if we are feeling like unsure, maybe that's just like that doesn't like sit right with me, there's no way to really figure that out until you do it. And then again, you can't undo it once you've done that. Even for people who abandon their children or give up their parental rights or things like that, you can't really ever unhave a child or unfeel the obligation of having, if you can hear my cat, those are my children that I birthed and she's screaming. You can't ever unfeel the obligation of being somebody who is supposed to take care of a kid. All right, let's take your daughter to work day. So we're gonna watch some more of this TikTok.
I had severe perinatal depression, which is like postpartum depression, but during your pregnancy. I had to quit university and my full-time job because I was unable to work due to it, and also severe morning sickness. Thankfully, the worst of the depression went away when my son was born, but my postpartum experience was still horrible. He was colicky. He never slept for more than 45 minutes, ever, for 9 months. I had to walk laps in my house with him strapped to my chest 24/7 to stop the crying. My husband took shifts with me and was, and is, very helpful, but it was life-sucking. I had trouble connecting with him because he screamed nonstop from the moment he came out.
Fair.
I didn't have the space to bond with this little being that never stopped crying. How do you create a relationship with a baby who only screams?
This is another thing that's important to address in the regretful parents dilemma of like, how did we get here? A lot of times, especially, this is something that as a child free by choice person was very game changing for me, is unpacking the difference between the reality of being a parent and the fantasy of being a parent, because a lot of us are sort of indoctrinated with this fantastical version of parenthood that people sell us, especially like in a generational context, right? Like parents who want to be grandparents, and so they tell you all of these lovely stories about when you were a baby, and like it's all very sentimental and sweet, except that sometimes babies aren't easy to care for. Sometimes babies are colicky and don't sleep for more than 45 minutes at a time. Sometimes babies are profoundly disabled. Sometimes babies are really finicky. Sometimes babies really don't want to be sleeping away from their primary caregivers. Sometimes babies have medical issues. Sometimes babies have temperamental issues or behavioral issues, whatever. There are so many things that can change somebody's experience of parenthood that we don't talk about. And so folks can find themselves in this situation where they're like, hold on a second. This was not the fantasy that I was sold. I was supposed to get a mini-me that I can strap into a stroller and parade around the mall and like show all of my friends who all ooh and ah and give me like oshkosh bagosh overalls, and it was supposed to be cute and fun, except that like I'm covered in piss and shit and throw up and like my kid won't stop screaming. Those are very divergent experiences. And so being honest about this is one thing about the regretful parents thing that I think is important, is that these folks are being very honest about their experiences. And I know that some people have a lot of like vitriol for the regretful parents discourse. There are people who say like these people who regret having their kids need to like shut up and deal with it, right? Or these people are ungrateful, or these people are like bad people. I've seen that discourse also, that like you guys must be awful or terrible people. There's something wrong with you if you don't like having kids, right? And I want to be clear. I think there's a difference between feeling regretful, having some trauma or some like mental illness around that, and like running around and posting on Facebook about how like,
I hate my fucking kids. Like,
those aren't the same. Publicly acknowledging how much you dislike or regret or hate your children sucks. No one should be doing that. But I think there is something to be said for contributing to a discourse that is honest and encourages people to really weigh the honest and genuine possibilities of parenthood, so that we don't have people who are just not cut out to be parents having kids who then turn out and traumatize their children, right? People who aren't fit to be parents or aren't a good fit for being parents shouldn't be parents. So while it's like, again, hard to hear, I think it's still a good thing to talk about though. Let's get back to this TikTok.
No one I knew had this much trouble with their first baby. Even my sister, who was so experienced and so good with kids, could only handle it for a couple of hours. I felt so alone and like I was broken and horrible for not feeling what other moms feel. I started going to therapy then because I didn't want to burden my child with my mental health issues like my parents did to me.
You love to see it.
Things got so much better. My husband and I got married, and while I still had trouble with bonding with my son, and I always had a small sense of disconnection from my life, I protected him fiercely and put everything I had into being a stable, happy, fun, and caring parent. When he was a toddler, it was probably the happiest time for me in my entire life. and my son was thriving. I think if we had only had one child, I might have found a way through. We decided to have a second child because of pressure from family and the pervasive narrative around the only child.
This sucks. The narrative that only children will be inherently lonely or sad, that everybody needs a playmate, not true. The truth is that you can effectively and healthily socialize your child through a variety of means, including daycare, by the way, for as much as people shit on fucking daycare. Early start, the elementary years of school, especially things like play dates, community involvement, right? Like read me a book at the library day. There are so many ways that we can provide our children with a variety of social encounters and like enrichment essentially that don't include having another child if you don't want to or are not ready or just like really not equipped to have another child. This is another reason that it's very important for people to be offered, first of all, realistic information about what it's like to be a parent, but second of all, access to medical care if that means that they need to terminate a pregnancy that is unwanted or unsafe for them.
She was born when my son was 2.5. I struggled again with perinatal depression. Then when she was born, I completely broke down.
Oh boy.
I was unable to deal with the multitasking and demands required of caring for a sensitive, high-needs toddler and a newborn. She was an easy baby compared to her brother and slept much better, but the demands of 2 kids are unimaginable until you have them. It's so much harder than anyone leads you to believe. When my husband went back to work, I just sat on the floor and cried with both of them. I never got used to it. It has never gotten easier. I would later find out that I had undiagnosed ADHD and that I am autistic, and that both my children are also ADHD. It was, and still is, an absolute nightmare for me.
This is another thing that I wanted to talk about. If you've taken a peek at the Regretful Parents subreddit, woo! Very sad, a lot of pain and trauma there, but one through line in a lot of the stories there is, in my opinion, like a blatant ableism. There's some really vicious ableism going on in that subreddit, and I want to be clear. I, as a clinician, as a human, don't want to shame anybody for expressing honest feelings of difficulty or trauma or sadness or fear or grief about parenting a child that requires more accommodations than what we initially anticipated, or especially what are easily available through things like public education, etc. All of that can be very difficult. The financial impact of that can be very difficult, especially in a late-stage capitalist dystopian nightmare. And the attitude that autistic children, ADHD children, medical or cognitive disabilities in children make them less worthy, less valid, or less worthy of having is an ableist take. This sucks. This is another reason that I feel like it's really important for people to reflect inward and to have honest information about parenting. Because to me, I know this might be kind of a hot take, especially as a clinician, if you are a person who would not love a child with a disability who is like difficult as much as you would love the sort of fantasy child that you've drawn up in your head, you might not be a person who is well suited for parenting. I don't mean to say that in a way that is hurtful. I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but I do think that the way that child-free by choice people are interrogated is an energy that we should also channel when folks are choosing to have children. Not that we should interrogate people, but that when you say, I don't want to have kids, people ask you, well, how come? Well, don't you think you'll change your mind? Well, what if you meet somebody who wants to have kids? Or what if you get old and you're lonely? Or who's going to take care of you at the end of your life? Or what if you don't relate to any of your friends anymore? Or don't you think that you're not going to have anything to do? Endless fucking questions about regret and fear and grief and end of life stuff and your legacy and like so many things. And it's not that I'm like judging or shitting on people for being genuinely curious, but oftentimes these questions are laced with like an element of judgment and like shame, right? Like condescension. And I don't think that we should treat anybody with shame and condescension. However, I do think that this attitude of like, maybe we should ask ourselves some questions about why we're doing something is an attitude that we should extend towards folks when they say, I want to have a baby, right? Why? Don't you think that that might be hard? Well, will that integrate well with the goals that you have for yourself as a person? How's that going to impact your family? How's that going to impact your career? Is that going to be something feasibly that you can pull off financially? What if your child is disabled? What if your child is difficult? What if you end up with a vision of a family that doesn't line up with your fantasy of that? What if you end up getting a divorce? What if the person that you're parenting with turns out to be a total shitbag and isn't helpful to you? What if you end up with a disability and you can't care for your child? Will your partner adequately be able to take care of them? Don't you think that you'll be sad? Don't you think that you might grieve your life before you had kids? These are all questions that it's important for somebody to weigh for themselves. And again, I'm not saying that people should ask these questions in a condescending or a shitty way, right? I do think that we should be asking them though, because the reality is that if you are somebody who would feel a deep sense of regret or grief or, I don't know, vitriol towards a child or towards your life if it doesn't turn out exactly the way that you've like pictured it, especially things like gender disappointment, right? Like people who feel strongly that like, I want one boy and one girl and then we're done. What if you have a child who's assigned female at birth and grows up to be trans? Will you love them the same? What if you have many children and none of them are assigned the sex at birth that you wanted them to be, right? What then? What if you have a child who grows up to be queer or LGBTQ or like any marginalized identity that you just like didn't think that they would be? They're important things to weigh and to consider. And so this is another part of the regretful parents thing that is like hard for people, I think, to talk about and to be honest about. But while I don't agree with the ableism around it, and I think it's really something that we should unpack within ourselves, the idea that like people who are disabled or have mental health conditions or whatever are like less worthy, it is something that's important to talk about. And honestly, I commend people who say, I probably wouldn't love a child as much if they were disabled, or I would have a really hard time not feeling regretful if my child grew up to be autistic for not having children, right? I don't think that's a good idea or a good ideal to have, but it is a good thing to be honest about that and to then make choices that are guided by realistic expectations around like what that would mean for you and for your life and how you might, for example, traumatize the child to the dickens by being an ableist person raising a disabled child.
I love both my kids, truly, but every single day feels like the Groundhog Day from hell. The pandemic started when my daughter turned 1. Having an autistic 1-year-old and 3-year-old with no outside support, community, or help in 2020 was torture. I got deeply depressed and was unable to get out of bed for almost a year. It has been 5 years now, and I have come in and out of it, but I have never truly recovered from the depression. My brain will never be the same. I have taken every medication you can think of. I have never stopped going to therapy. I have done EMDR and DBT. I have worked out, journaled, tried to start hobbies, turned to friends, asked for help, you name it. I have tried for years to heal, but I am not healing, and I am tired of trying. The truth is that I am deeply unhappy with my life. I can't work. My kids need full-time care. They are both special needs. My husband's job supports us financially, so he can't stay home. Even if I could, I dropped out of university. I have no real skills. The world in general is a disaster. It feels like I am not a person anymore. Outside of my kids, I don't exist. I know motherhood is supposed to be selfless, and I am okay with being selfless sometimes, or even most of the time. But I didn't think it would mean that I don't have a self anymore at all.
This is another thing that shows up in the research about regretful parents is the degree to which your identity is related to parenthood. It is sort of paradoxical in a way, but folks who identify strongly with the role of parent as like a primary part of their identity do seem to report being regretful parents less often or to a lesser degree, and vice versa. It's possible that this is because folks who identify strongly with the role of parent end up becoming parents, and folks who don't, but it's also possible that this is a thing, our brains do this, right? It's an evolutionary process where ourselves, we're hardwired to find contentment in the things that we do have, right? So like, for example, you get a shitty tattoo, you feel really embarrassed and like I don't like this anymore. But over time, you kind of stop seeing it. You get used to it. It just becomes a thing that you have, and you start to see it less and less in like an embarrassing light, right? This is because your brain wants you to be content with the things that you have. And it's possible that this is at play too in the parental, like the regretful parent arena. However, the reality is that folks who have their complete identity consumed by parenthood and lack the ability to have outside hobbies or relationships or community, this is a risk factor for your mental health. Generally speaking, not a good thing. People should very much have the opportunity to branch out and be like separate from their identity of parent, but also like spouse and friend and family member, right? Like daughter, cousin, brother, nibbling, whatever. Because, I mean, the reality is that we are complex and multifaceted beings who deserve to be seen in many lights, and that's very validating for us. And in the way that our society is structured right now, like there is no village. This is another thing that folks have talked about a lot, is that even for folks who want to be parents, there is not a village to help raise the child, right? And especially with the heavy focus on individualism and the way that folks are very like, not super community oriented sometimes, but also that like folks are drowning. So it's hard for folks to extend care and compassion to someone else when they can't take care of themselves, right? This is a risk factor for being a parent. It's not as easy to rear a child when grandparents aren't around, when siblings aren't there to help you, when you don't have cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, community members who are willing to step in and babysit and late night feed and take a shift and tell you to go to bed and clean your house and like whatever, all these things, right? That is all part of this equation of like, will somebody become a regretful parent or not? It's not really a question that we can like definitively answer, but I do think it's important to consider.
That self is not even an option. I feel like I fell into my life accidentally instead of creating it. I am always in a daze. I don't care about my appearance. I hate looking in the mirror because I not only hate the way I look, but I don't even see myself. I have pushed away my friends and family. I think about dying all the time. I know it's hurting my kids. I know it's hurting my husband. I don't see a solution because if I die, I traumatize them for life. And if I live, I'm probably still going to.
Real quick, if you often find yourself thinking about, fantasizing about, fixating on thoughts of dying, falling asleep and never waking up anymore, accidentally getting into like an accident or a tragedy that causes you to die, that is considered passive ideation. We might have to bleep parts of that, but passive SI. That is very much something that you deserve to and should speak to a therapist or a clinician or somebody about. That doesn't mean that you have an active desire to do those things. And it is still important to talk about because that's part of mental illness. Like that is a part of depression or anxiety or something that you deserve to receive some formal support around. A lot of folks don't know that, and it's important to talk about.
I feel completely and utterly trapped and devoid of life. Besides my kids, I have nothing to live for, and not in a good way. My kids are my reason for living is a dark, sad statement, and I feel alone in feeling that way. I am an artist, I am a free spirit, and I am a romantic. I am a poet and an activist and a good friend. I am kind, beautiful, and deserving, but only in the life that might have existed if I didn't have kids.
This is the part that like kind of got me. This is why I wanted to talk about this on the channel, because this statement of like, I'm all of these things, but only in the life where I didn't have kids is bleak. But this is the way that a lot of folks feel, and this woman is not alone in feeling this way. Like, let's be very clear about that. If you are a person who feels drowned or suffocated by being a parent, you're not alone in that. And it is a very workable issue. It is something that you are allowed to talk about, not to or in front of your kids, please. However, there are therapists, there are community like networks, there are formal support systems that can very much be validating and hold space for you to be honest about that and to move through it, to work through it, to talk about it, and to do some self-regulating, to receive some support and some strategies and all of the things, right? There's also an uncanny knack that children have for jumping up and down on your most sensitive trauma buttons, and that happens a lot in parenthood. So especially a therapist who's able to work with you in a trauma-informed capacity can help you to unearth these things that you might have not really consciously noticed your kids are sort of, you know, jamming that button in all day. And that can make a world of a difference in not feeling so suffocated by parenthood. So for what it's worth.
In this life, I am mom.
Woo. Full transparency, I did plan to share with you some stuff from the Regretful Parents subreddit, but I think that we've yammed on for long enough. So let me know if you guys want me to talk about that in another video. If you have specific ones that you'd like me to look at, I'm happy to talk about those. However, if you are a person who has struggled with this, please know that you're very much not alone in that. I always have resources in the description that are not affiliate links. They're not related to like me financially, but they're just things that are great resources if you want to find a therapist of your very own. So check that out. And also, if you have thoughts about this, if you have questions about this, please put them in the comments. I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are. If you are child-free by choice, if you're a parent, if you've been a fence sitter on this journey, let me know how that turned out for you, what your thoughts are, because I am very curious what the community's feedback is. So if you like the video, you can subscribe. If you like the Girl, what is my outro? If you like the video, you can subscribe, and then don't forget to share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I'll see you guys next time.